This is Chapter 7, Screencast number 3, focusing on agriculture. So about 10,000 years ago, humans made a shift from being primarily hunter-gatherers to agriculture. Agriculture involved the planting of crops, and it also involved maintaining animals for food sources. And agriculture stayed generally the same for many, many years until the Industrial Revolution. When the Industrial Revolution occurred, there were changes to the mechanization of agriculture, and that began the move toward the type of agriculture that we have now. And further changes were developed in about the 1950s that also substantially changed how agriculture is now done. So let's take a look at that. Agriculture has generally improved the human diet, but it creates environmental problems. Now, you might remember the opening case study showing the farmer of Polyface Farms, Joel Salatin, and you might picture the little red barn and things like that. But most of our food does not, in the United States, does not come through that type of agriculture. It comes from what people call industrial agriculture. And that's the term I will typically use when talking about modern agriculture that provides food for most people in the United States. It's important to note that all of these terms here in purple are equivalent. So when people talk about conventional agriculture, they're not talking about the little red barn or what had been done for hundreds of years, or even an animal pulling a plow. Conventional agriculture is conventional for the United States right now, which is industrial. It's sometimes called agribusiness, and it's also surprisingly called the Green Revolution. Often we use the term green meaning environmentally friendly. In this case, Green Revolution term was applied because they were able to produce more crops. So all of these terms are equivalent. I will try to stick with industrial agriculture. So industrial agriculture has advantages and environmental impacts, but let's first look at what it is, what makes it industrial agriculture. The first item is mechanization. So mechanization can lead to being able to use machines to mix soil or aerate soil, plant seeds, and harvest crops. So that's a significant feature of industrial agriculture. The second feature, which has been actually the most significant in terms of improving agriculture, is irrigation. That is taking water to water the plants. Often in dry areas, the water is withdrawn from groundwater and then is applied to the plants. So we'll look at the pros and cons of that. Next is the use of fertilizers. In the old way of farming, there were fertilizers that were mainly made from animal waste, for example, and they contained carbon and nitrogen and phosphorus, and nitrogen and phosphorus are limiting factors, so the plants grew better when additional fertilizer was added. But nowadays, fertilizer is not typically from that source. It's typically fixed, which we'll talk about later, and causes problems with runoff. Pesticides are any organism that competes, a pest is any organism that competes for a food source with humans. And so pesticides are any chemical way of preventing that from happening. So the pest may be a weed, for example, a plant, or it could be an insect. Next we have genetic modification, which we'll talk about in a little more detail in a few slides. And last we have the concept of energy subsidies, how much energy we have to put into a particular farm system, agricultural system, in order to get the food out of it. And last we'll look at alternatives. All right, so the first slide here is showing irrigation. So again, watering of the plants. So it has transformed agriculture. Unfortunately, it does have several drawbacks. The first one is depletion of water resources. So in the United States, for example, most of our a lot of our food is now grown in the plains. The plains were very dry, and so the water that's being used to water the plants in those areas is coming from groundwater. And that groundwater, which we'll look at a little further in the next 2 chapters, that water is actually being depleted. It's getting used up or withdrawn faster than it can be recharged or refilled with rain. And so that's a problem. The second issue with irrigation is waterlogging. You may know that if you water a plant too much, the roots get weak and the plant will not survive. And so that is an issue when plants are then watered too much. Salinization means increasing salt content. Saline, like saline that you might use for contacts, means salt. And what happens is that water contains mineral salts. And if water is applied to the surface and then the sun comes up and evaporates off the water faster than the plants have taken it all up, that will leave behind salts. And salts are very unfriendly to plants. Plants do not do well on salts. They die. So that's the third issue with irrigation. Okay, another feature of industrial agriculture is a change to the type of fertilizer that's used. There are 2 types of fertilizers, organic and inorganic. And as you probably recall from the chemistry chapter, organic in this term means something that is from organic matter. And it's, of course, carbon bound to carbon, carbon bound to hydrogen. But inorganic fertilizers, they are material from plants and animals, often decomposed animal manure. Inorganic fertilizers do not contain any carbon, and they are synthetic, which means man-made. So these are fertilizers produced commercially, and the way it's usually produced is by burning natural gas. Remember, natural gas is the molecule N2, or 2 nitrogen atoms together. And that changes the nitrogen in the atmosphere from N2 to a form, it's called fixing it, to a form in which plants can take it up. Think back to the nitrogen cycle. So a couple of issues with that. First of all, it involves the use of fossil fuels. It's more likely to create pollution by being carried in runoff from farmland because usually there's higher nitrogen or phosphorus content. It does not add any organic matter, any carbon to the soil. And so the soil eventually becomes depleted of that organic matter. And it often leads to monocropping. Monocropping is when just one type of crop is planted. And usually it's well understood what amount of inorganic fertilizer is needed for that particular crop. And so it's done that way instead of using more than one plant. Okay, I mentioned fertilizer runoff. When the nitrogen is not taken up by the plants, it carries down into often ditches or directly even into a river. But these ditches, these runoff streams, then feed into larger and larger bodies of water, and eventually you have polluted water. So that's an issue. Next, we'll look at pesticides. So again, a pest is anything that competes with humans for a food source, and a pesticide is a substance that kills or controls the organisms that people consider to be pests. It can be insecticide targeting insects and herbicide targeting plants. So we have broad spectrum we have different classifications of pesticides, and a particular pesticide may fall into either one of the first 2 and one of the second 2. So let's look at the first 2. A broad spectrum pesticide is a pesticide that kills many different pests, all different kinds. Selective pesticides kills a narrow range of organisms. So you might have something like Roundup that kills a great variety of plants, or you might have something very selective, something that just kills a particular beetle that competes for, or a particular worm, let's say, that competes for corn. So that's a selective pesticide. So again, a pesticide would fall into one or the other category. We have two other categories, persistent and non-persistent. A persistent pesticide remains in the environment a long time. Can be typically 30 years, even more. A non-persistent pesticide breaks down relatively rapidly, usually in a few weeks or even a few months. An example of a persistent pesticide that was used in Vietnam was Agent Orange, and that is still in the soil today. So that's a very long time. Let's see, 25, 45 years. So a particular pesticide could be broad spectrum, but non-persistent. So Roundup is an example of that. It kills a great variety of pests, but it does break down relatively quickly in the soil. So you can have something that's broad spectrum and persistent. That would be a double whammy of badness. Or you could have something that's selective, but not persistent, and that would be the best of the possible scenarios. But you can also have selective but persistent, or broad but non-persistent, etc. Okay, so let's look at what happens here with pesticide application. I'm going to skip ahead for a minute to finish up this topic, and then we'll move back. Okay, so the problem with pesticides, one of the problems with pesticides, is that pests have a high reproductive capacity, and so they become resistant to the pesticide, just like a bacteria becomes resistant to an antibiotic. So over time, they tend to evolve resistance to a pesticide. So then what do? Develop a new pesticide. Let's look at the treadmill here. Develop a new pesticide. Most of the pests die, but a few will be resistant individuals will survive, and pass that on, and eventually pesticide-resistant population will take over. So then you apply the pesticide again, but you don't get much of a result. And so you need to come up with a new pesticide. And it's called the Pesticide Treadmill, not only because it's going around in circles, but the net gain is zero. Irrigation has increased the quantity of food produced, but pesticide use since the 1950s has actually not led to higher agricultural production. So it's really a pointless treadmill in which we are adding chemicals that may have various effects on us, on insects that are not intended to be killed, positive insects, and so forth. I'm going to pause this here, and then we will go back to another issue with pesticides.